Welcome to Getting Sketchy Live, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. And now, let's get sketchy.
Hello there, everyone. Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and welcome to Getting Sketchy, where either myself and my good friend and artist and teacher, Ashley Hurst, tries to create a drawing, a very sketchy drawing inside of 45 minutes live for you here on YouTube. So our torture is your entertainment here. And tonight I'm going to be doing the drawing, and we're going to be working with charcoal, and I'll get into the materials in just a minute. But first, I want to welcome Ashley for joining us. Ashley, how you doing over there?
I'm doing well, Matt. Thanks for asking. Hope you guys are doing great out there, and you got your charcoal ready. I know that Alana, Judith, and Thomas are planning to draw, and you should draw along with Matt and them as well.
So, as I mentioned, we're going to be using charcoal. We're going to get really nice and dirty tonight. We're going to loosen up, and hopefully I'm going to show you a way of drawing that some of you might not be aware of, or maybe you've never tried before, and maybe it will be an aha moment for you, of course. But before we get into tonight's lesson, I just want to remind you that we do have a membership program over at thevirtualinstructor.com, which is full of drawing and painting courses on a variety of subjects and media. Our courses include videos and ebooks, and they're all included as part of our membership program. We also have live lessons. In fact, after this broadcast on YouTube, we're going to go over to thevirtualinstructor.com and do tonight's live lesson where we're working on a very detail-oriented pen and ink drawing of a lizard man. So it's kind of a fantasy image with pen and ink. And so that'll be a nice contrast with what I'm going to be doing tonight here with the charcoal. Those, of course, are included with our membership program. Weekly critiques, which are part of the Members Minute. And there's also a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers over there as well. There's a link in the description below if you want to check that out. Also, if you want to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, there's a link in the description below. You can check that out as well. And that's a good way to get on our newsletter list, actually. Every time we publish new, well, not every time we publish new lessons, but every month or so, I send out a newsletter with all of the new lessons on the site. So if you get those 3 course videos and ebooks, that will put you on our list for the newsletter, of course. You'll be notified when those new lessons come out. And also when we do Getting Sketchy here on YouTube. Also, speaking of YouTube, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, what are you doing? Well, it's absolutely free to subscribe to this channel. And of course, we cover a broad variety of drawing and painting subjects and media here on the YouTube channel as well. Ashley, you have anything to add to that before we get into this one?
No, I don't believe so. I'm anxious to see what you're drawing tonight. I know that you're planning on doing sort of a positive and negative approach to the charcoal drawing. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to be basically working with positive and negative space and basically playing off the lights and the darks within the scene.
Okay.
And we're going to think more like painters tonight than we are drawers.
I like that.
Well, should be interesting in 45 minutes, of course. So I guess with that, we'll go ahead and switch over to the main camera. All right, well, I'm going to be working on just regular drawing paper. This is Strathmore drawing paper. This is the 400 series paper. And I'm going to be using a variety of different forms of charcoal. My mic might be peeking in the corner there, but we'll just consider it a nice accessory down there. I'm going to be using a couple of charcoal pencils and a couple of pieces of vine charcoal. This is the very soft and powdery and easily erased charcoal. And I also have some compressed charcoal here. That compressed charcoal, if you didn't know, is the same material in the charcoal pencil here. It's just, in a stick form. And I have a blending stump handy. I'm going to keep that off the surface here. And I've got a couple of erasers here. First of all, they're all fun erasers too. We've got the kneaded eraser here. That's a lot of fun because you can pull it kneaded, of course.
My son just made armor for a Lego man out of a kneaded eraser. It looks great.
It's pretty cool. This is a Tombow, not a Tombow. Yeah, it is a mono eraser by Tombow. It's the Mono Zero eraser. This is actually a vinyl eraser, but it will allow me to erase with some precision. And then I've got the really fun electric
I can hear
here.
that. I hope they can hear that at home.
Yeah, here.
It's like a little Dremel.
This thing is a lot of fun to use, although I see that the eraser and the tip is out a little bit too far, so we'll fix that there. So hopefully I get to use that a lot, and hopefully the battery doesn't die.
It sounds like going to the dentist.
It does. And you say that. I went to the dentist today. Actually, I took my daughter Avery to the dentist. It was time for her to go to the dentist. She still has baby teeth, actually. And she is she's 12, but still has baby teeth. Two baby teeth.
Not for much longer.
2 baby teeth.
Yeah.
So anyway, the photo reference that I'm working for is up here in the corner. This has been edited a little bit. I took the color out. I cropped it down a little bit to make the composition a little bit more interesting. I really wish the horizon was a little bit higher up. I could do that in the drawing, but I think I'm going to kind of stay true to the photo reference as much as possible. But that being said, tonight's exercise is not about accuracy. So I'm not going to try to draw every tree branch or try to get the angles of the trees just exactly right. I'm going to try to get the perspective on the building as close to possible, as close as it is in the reference, but I'm not going to spend too much time on trying to make this as accurate as possible. Instead, I'm going to try to focus more on trying to capture the mood of the scene. And the way that I'm going to go about creating this drawing, you'll see, kind of lends itself to that approach.
You know, that's a great comment, Matt, because when you're sketching, sometimes you can't achieve everything. You have to kind of have a goal.
Oh, yeah.
And especially when it's not maybe a full-on finished piece of artwork, but sketches that you're doing to prepare for maybe a piece of artwork that you'd work a little longer on. So your goal could be proportion, or in this case, it's mood. So that's a great tip.
Yeah, and I should point this out. I'd normally point this out here with Getting Sketchy. 45 minutes is not enough time to do a complete drawing.
I didn't make it last week.
That's why we call it Getting Sketchy. Because we're creating sketches here and we're being very loose with the images that we create. Sometimes they turn out a little bit more refined than we expected.
Yeah, those are the good nights.
But sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do turn out a little bit more sketchy. But tonight, this one's going to be a little bit looser and more painterly, of course. I'm going to be doing a lot of what is called rendering. And rendering is basically when you use your eraser to create the illusion of form or create the illusion of the drawing and the scene. So I'm going to be using the eraser a lot. And charcoal, of course, lends itself to approaching a drawing that way. And I'm going to be really thinking about the values and the contrast between the different values to create an illusion, hopefully, here in this image. I do need to remind you that if you are watching this on YouTube live, there is a chat box. Of course, you can make comments and ask questions. If you put them in all capital letters, that will help Ashley, who's running the chat box, see them a little bit easier. And Ashley and I will do our best to answer those questions and address those comments. And like always, they don't have to be about what we're specifically doing tonight. They can be anything art related. And like I said, we'll do our very best to answer those questions for you. All right, let's go ahead and get started.
And we do have some comments already.
Okay.
Nexus asks, can I use pencil? I don't have charcoal. Sure you can. You may work similarly to Matt, where you're sort of laying down some extra graphite, maybe using the side of your pencil and then erasing out of it, like he plans to work some. Or you may just work in a more traditional fashion where you're mostly adding media as opposed to adding and subtracting media. But you can still follow along and try to capture that mood and atmosphere that we see even with graphite.
Yeah, I'm going to be going back and forth between the charcoal and the eraser. And that's going to be more difficult with a pencil, for sure. But you can do that.
Okay, we've got another comment. Judith says, I'm studying focal points right now. Where would you say the focal point is in this drawing? Well, some artworks are more use emphasis to create a focal point more than others. Emphasis is created with a sort of directional, directional elements, and then also sometimes something that's very unusual or a color that is localized or unique to the artwork. This doesn't have any color, but if I were to say that there's a focal point, or at least the first place that I look, it's the light side of the building for me, because there's light on there, there's texture, and then there's that dark rectangle that kind of stands out from that. So that's the first place I go to. For me, that's the main character.
Yeah, for me, it would be the opening of the door, which is what Ashley was talking about. There's high contrast there. It's also positioned very close to one of the thirds, the lower left-hand third.
And the horizon kind of goes right into it as a directional.
All right.
Good question.
I'm ready. I'm going to start the timer and go with this, and you can keep the questions going, and I'm going to start making marks.
All right.
All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of look at where the horizon line is, and I'm just going to bring some of that charcoal right across here. And in my mind, there's kind of a little bit of a slant that's happening down there. And a lot of this information's down here in the bottom, very bottom here.
What kind of what brand of charcoal are you using? Do you happen to know?
I don't know. I would have to guess this is probably Winsor & Newton.
Okay. Brent Does Art says you usually use Generals, and that's what I was actually thinking too, Brent. I use Generals a lot.
Yeah, I use a lot of General's products, but I don't for this. I think these are Winsor & Newton.
I used to draw with Yarka vine charcoal. Yarka, I think that's a Russian brand. A long time ago. I don't know if they still exist.
So you can see I'm using the side of the charcoal to just kind of fill in this area quickly and loosely.
Now, Inferno asks, how can I do this in Photoshop? I do digital art. You might want to start with sort of a medium gray layer, like a layer 1, not necessarily your background layer. Leave the background white, and then start and kind of work with your eraser tool. And I would manipulate the opacity of your eraser tool and the hardness of your edges as you go. And just try to work sort of with that one layer, maybe adding and subtracting with grays, with black, and manipulate the opacity of that as well. I don't know if that makes sense.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, there's a little bit of value in the sky off here in the distance where we have some clouds and maybe a little bit up here in the corner. I'm not going to leave this just completely stark white up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first pull up some of this charcoal to indicate where some of those trees are behind it. So I'm just going to pull up whatever I can here. And let's go ahead and just use the charcoal to go ahead and pull up this shape here.
So that's what makes this kind of painterly, because you can drag the medium around a little bit.
Yeah, and you can go over the top of it and manipulate it and pull it all around. So I'm kind of thinking of this in layers. First I'm establishing what's here in the foreground. Now I'm kind of just going in and adding maybe some hints of what's in the distance. And like some of these really dark shapes, those are going to be some of the last things we add with it. Well, maybe not the last things, but those are going to be things that we add with the compressed charcoal.
Okay, so you're establishing your shapes with the vine charcoal right now.
Right, because they're really soft and easy to manipulate. And just kind of using the blending tool here to kind of create the illusion of maybe some shapes of some trees off in the distance.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see how when you go over the top of this with a blending stump, you can use your finger too. It really softens the charcoal and brings the value down a little bit.
Yeah, that's true. It goes down pretty black, but it turns to, I would say, lighter than charcoal gray for the vine charcoal when you start to touch it.
And I don't need to worry about things getting too messy or anything. Things are going to get messy, and that's okay. So we got some distant trees and things back here.
So we have a little break between Getting Sketchy and the program over at the Virtual Instructor that starts about 30 minutes after this. And I promise that Matt's going to clean his hands for 30 minutes between these two shows before he gets to.
Because we're working with pen and
drawing.
ink.
Yeah, gotta be careful with that.
That is a complete opposite of what we're doing here. Complete opposite. Okay, so what we need to keep in mind here, and I'll remind you of this, is that we're creating an illusion. So that this illusion is created by the relationships of values, which values are the darkness or lightness of a color. In this case, we're just working with grayscale, so we're just working with different values. And shapes and lines and textures, of course, and that's what I'm focusing on. I'm not trying to create a landscape of trees here, in other words.
You're just seeing the elements right now, values and shapes.
And I'm really focusing on what's in the distance.
Yeah.
All right, and speaking of the distance, let's go ahead and bring a little bit of value down here, some darker value up here. And kind of work that in. We don't want our sky to just be at a big expanse.
Yeah, it's lightest near the horizon, but as you work your way up, we can see those subtle grays.
We can just kind of be a little bit free with this and kind of let the clouds kind of happen here.
So you're using the kneaded eraser just to model a little bit in the clouds
A little
now?
bit, just very slightly. And I'm also trying to go very quickly here too.
Well, you've gotten a real jump on this one. You still have 39 minutes to go.
Oh yeah, but it goes so quick.
That's true.
And usually when I start fast, that's when I get a little bit overconfident.
Alana's got a question. Is Rembrandt mixed media paper too smooth for this? I got a free pad from Blick, and I'm trying it for the first time, but it feels much smoother than my Canson Mitence paper. Yeah, I don't think it's too smooth for a charcoal sketch, but is that paper as smooth as Bristol board, Matt?
No, but not much heavier. Or
Okay.
The tooth isn't much more pronounced.
Yeah, I'm
than
sure
that,
it's
so
fine for charcoal sketching. You may not be able to develop or build up as many layers over time on a smoother surface like that, of course, without spraying it in between layers with a workable fixative, if you don't mind doing that.
Let's soften this up a little bit. Some of those erasures with the kneaded eraser were a little too linear.
Oh, that sky is looking good.
Well, thanks.
It looks like you're manipulating the darker areas in there a little bit to keep our attention down into the picture.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull some of those darker, just like you said, trying to pull the viewer's eye down to this tree, and hopefully they'll make their way back to the building once we get to the building. So by basically filling in some of these darker spots or adding these darker spots, hopefully kind of the feeling of clouds will be there just by having a little bit of contrast.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is a deviation from the reference. Remember, we're not trying to copy the reference here, exactly trying to capture the mood.
You're trying to use the reference. Use what you take from it what you believe is, I guess, beneficial to your composition, and you guys can do that out there. You can manipulate the darks in the sky a little differently than Matt if you would interpret it differently or move the horizon line up like he mentioned. References are suggestions. Alana says that she doesn't have time to spray with fixative in 45 minutes. Yeah, that's true. Those few minutes she would have to wait for it to dry.
Well, you're
too
not.
precious in 45 minutes.
You are not you are not bound by the 45-minute time frame. It's just me.
Yeah, that's just what we do to Matt.
Just me right now.
Luis mentions the tree might need to be a bit bigger, but I think you've just sketched the darkest lower tree.
This is not the larger tree.
That larger tree isn't in place. So Matt's kind of working from back to front, which is not a bad way to think when you're working with charcoal or with pastel or any of those media that layer very well. Different than maybe Prismacolor, Might not be able to do that with Prismacolor.
With colored pencils.
Right. So we're kind of thinking about the ground plane and background first.
That's why I said this is more like a painting process than a drawing process. So we're going to kind of allow the image to emerge from the surface, like some of that early photography, early photography.
I had a wonderful art teacher that was a big believer in his artwork developing evenly over the surface all at the same time. And he would reference, darkroom photography when you put the paper, I guess, and I'm probably going to say things wrong because I don't do darkroom photography, but you put it in some bath of chemicals and the image goes from, barely visible to a little more visible to eventually high contrast and crisp. And we would work, at least in his class, so that we could get a good grade, we would work all over the composition at the same time. The idea was you could stop at any time and it's evenly worked, and so you could call it finished at any time. And it's not a bad way to think. And I think it's good to skip around a little bit while you work in the composition so that you're always seeing the big picture of the, the entirety of your composition and keeping that number one.
Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm just using the kneaded eraser, And I'm kind of defining that light edge that happens where the field meets the line of trees in the distance. And this is where the corner of our building is going to be, somewhere right in here. But I'm working past that because that field goes on past it on the other side. And also thinking about where there's maybe some subtle directional strokes that change here, and they kind of help to pull the viewer's eye even more so into that building where that edge is going to be. And then, of course, we can go back and manipulate it too. There's also a real subtle line that comes across there.
So this image creates space in a couple of ways, really. It's got the atmospheric mood, the way the values are darker in the foreground and lighter along the horizon in the background, but it also uses scale relationship between that really big tree in the foreground and those just to the left of the building in the background. We can see the size of those trees in the background and get a good feel for the space back there.
And then these are some of those distant trees. It seems like they're a little bit darker there just in front. And then there's a little bit more trees behind it off in the distance. And I'll use my kneaded eraser here to just alter that edge
digging down in there a little bit to make the contour more irregular.
Yeah, a little bit.
More natural.
Pulling out some things here and there. And then maybe let's soften up this just a little bit. Just adding a little bit of variety.
Go ahead.
There.
Jason's got a question. When using charcoal, does oil from the hands affect the composition like the graphite? It could. It could. If you feel like your hands are pretty wet or clammy, you might want to keep them out of there. I'd rather use the stump myself. With the vine charcoal, it's so dusty, though. You can get away with kind of swiping through it with your hands a little bit.
Yeah, it can, but to a much lesser degree.
Mm-hmm. I know what you mean, though, Jason. I hate trying to erase graphite that I've, used my fingers in and can't get it off the surface. Graphite mud, that's what I like to call it. Brent Does Art says he likes how your clouds came out.
Oh, thanks, Brent. You can see how easy it is to manipulate the values just subtly with the vine charcoal. Still haven't used any of the compressed charcoal at this point.
Developer. Thanks, Gail. That was the word I was trying to remember. The developer used with darkroom photography.
I had to take darkroom photography, and that was so frustrating. I learned a lot from it, though, but I can't tell you how many rolls of film I went through until I actually got my first roll developed and actually worked.
Yeah, I guess that's pretty frustrating.
Yeah,
compared to the way we use digital film now, or digital files now. They're so cheap, so easy. Well, I understand that darkroom photography has been kind of on the comeback as a fine art medium, and that's good to hear.
Okay, so one thing I want you to notice is whenever, when you're creating the illusion of space in an image, typically objects that are closer to the viewer are going to have a greater level of contrast. So the darks are going to appear darker just because there's greater contrast between the lights and the darks. The darks are actually going to be darker as they get closer to you. But as you go off into the distance, the values get lighter and there's less contrast. And we can really see that happening in this image here. And as I'm kind of working into the foreground a little bit, I'm also trying to work a little bit from the left to the right. I do have a paper towel here that I'm going to use to put underneath my hand in just a minute. But let's go ahead and block in this building. So and we've got that tree kind of is right. This tree right here is kind of right at the edge.
We've got a couple of questions here, Matt, and one of them is about alcohol markers. I think you've done some lessons with those. Maybe the question was,
Yeah.
can you try sometime to do an alcohol marker lesson? We haven't used that on Getting Sketchy, but you've got some lessons on with alcohol markers, maybe at the Virtual Instructor.
Yeah, there's a few free lessons, and there's also a couple of live lesson series on using alcohol-based markers. There's a live lesson series that's devoted to just using alcohol-based markers with pen and ink.
Okay.
And I typically like to use alcohol-based markers with another medium like colored pencils.
I like how you use colored pencils over alcohol-based markers. That's a
Yeah.
good lesson.
And you can also use them with pen and ink, obviously, but I do like to use them with other mediums instead of just by themselves. The markers are, in my mind, they're not really a medium for finished artworks
Alone.
They're really better suited for sketching, but when you combine them with another medium, you can use them as like an underpainting, and then they're more suited as a finished medium.
That's how I like to see them. They soak right into the page. They don't really change the tooth.
Yeah, it's really hard to, especially when you're using them with marker paper, which is designed for marker applications. But used on their own, it's kind of hard. It's just like some of the aspects of watercolor. Watercolor, it's hard to get defined edges sometimes, and watercolor, alcohol-based markers, if I can talk. Sometimes it's difficult to get defined edges with the alcohol-based markers too. But that's all solved with colored pencils, of course.
Well, you did mention that they're maybe good for sketching. So, Mateo, maybe they'll make it onto Getting Sketchy sometime.
Yeah, maybe, but it's still, again, it's hard to get a refined drawing out of them, even a sketchier drawing.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine, especially in a limited time frame, a little more like we work here. But they're pretty cool. They're pretty cool.
Okay,
I just haven't used them very much myself.
Before I go too far over here, these dark pads, you can see how much of the charcoal.
Oh,
I
yeah.
used here. I'm going to go ahead and start manipulating some of this building here. Again, trying to keep my hand out of the way as much as possible.
Alana has a question. I've been trying to work on my freehand drawing, but I'm having a really hard time estimating the degree of curvature for any curved edge, harder than straight lines. Advice? I do have some advice for you, Alana. Do it with straight lines. You said you had the answer right there. Think about a curve, like a banana. I guess all bananas are curved, right? And then if you were to draw that banana with just straight lines, what would it look like? Where would you put the bends? And so I actually like to draw curvy things with straighter segments that end up having kind of big, obtuse, angled corners on them, and then introduce the curve kind of over that using the straighter lined version of the curve. Think about like I don't know how to say it. Think like a hexagon versus a circle. You could draw a circle as an octagon or hexagon and then change it to a circle, and the proportions would probably be better than if we just drew a circle outright. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So try to draw your curves with straighter lines and then change them to curves and see if you're more successful that way. I know that method or mode of taking or handling curves has really helped me.
Okay. So you can see here, I'm starting to erase out some of the highlights here in this building with the kneaded eraser. And this is basically what I'm doing, is drawing with the kneaded eraser. And if I get too light, I can just go back here with the blending stump and use it kind of like a pencil.
Yeah, this fine charcoal is very forgiving.
Whatever charcoal's on there. If there's not enough, I can just go back and put a little bit more on there and then mute it out a little bit. So you can see you can sit here and work the values until your heart is content. Charcoal is such a great medium for learning value and learning how to use value.
We used it almost exclusively in art school for the drawing classes. Rarely would we use graphite. It also, because our drawings were very large, and charcoal can really cover some space.
All right, so I'm going to erase out a few more lighter areas here. And of course, we've got the slats. I think I'm going to actually use the Tombow eraser here for these slats. I don't want to get too precise with this drawing.
Yeah, and it's like a distressed building too, so you got to be careful. You don't want to straighten it up, to clean it up too much. I like that worn, weathered quality to the building.
And they're not uniform highlights either. There's just, you know, it's maybe a little bit lighter at the top, then it gets a little darker at the bottom.
So you got to keep checking your reference. You know, if you start to say, well, those highlights are like light stripes, and then you look away from the picture and make your stripes in your building, you won't have that, maybe that subtle differentiation in highlights that Matt's referencing.
Yeah,
so keep looking at your reference.
Next thing you know, you'll have a zebra on your paper. A little bit of light right here. There's a little bit of grass right there. We'll just kind of keep at it down here, working down the side. And we can go back and make areas darker, don't forget. So we're going to do that. Right now we're just pulling out some of the lighter slats here.
Oh, I think we need some music that plays in the background while you draw, and when we get down to 1 minute, it speeds up like on Super Mario Brothers.
But we can't even hear that.
That's true. It was still that excitement, even if we couldn't hear it.
It's really amazing. This is a good thing to look at to show you just how quickly and easily charcoal can, you know, communicate something in a short period of time. You know, the top part of my building right here is a little bit thicker than what it is in the reference, but that's okay. Remember, we're going for mood, not necessarily making everything accurate here. But you know, you can, at this point, still pretty early, you can make out what this is. And
yeah, you've gotten pretty deep into the drawing. We're only halfway through the suggested timer.
Still creating the illusion of space there with just a little bit of value on the surface, and that kind of gives you an idea of how strong value is and how important it is in creating illusions in your drawings and paintings. That piece feels a little bit lighter, and there's another one that's a little bit lighter. Let's make that a little bit stronger.
This reminds me of the tobacco barns that we see sometimes around this area, often in the woods, and you wonder, you know, who used to use those?
Or who uses them still?
Who uses, what in the world are in those scary buildings now?
All right, I'm going to just put a little bit of hints of some lighter value on this side. This side of the building needs to be darker overall. So we don't want to lose that illusion of light. There's still some lighter values that exist here, but they're definitely
You just got to use a different
softer
section of the value scale to find them. You know, those lights on the dark side are still sort of medium gray or medium dark gray. Priya says that timer sure does make one nervous, and she's not even drawing.
Yeah, you ought to be doing this live.
It's fun though.
Everybody,
it is
fun.
It is nerve wracking, but it is fun. Anytime you kind of work outside of your comfort zone, there's a potential reward there. Potential, the operative word.
Yeah, I think what's the saying? Life begins at the end of your comfort zone.
Oh, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's something like that. But it's very true. Most of us live well within the borders of our comfort zone. Whenever we start to deviate from it, we freak out.
I don't mind deviating out of my comfort zone as long as it's not dangerous to my physical person. That's where I draw the line.
Definitely don't want to do.
I used to be a
dangerous.
risk taker type person a little bit more when I was younger, but I was immortal back then. Now I'm middle aged and well aware of my, that I have a timer going too, and it's halfway over. So, but I used to ride motorcycles and parasail, where you kind of run off a little mountain with a parachute. I don't know if I could do that stuff now. I know some older people, and older is a relative term, but quite a bit older than me that have been doing some skydiving lately. I think I'll wait until I'm in my 80s to do that. That way, if something goes wrong, I haven't lost much.
Okay, now I'm going back in with a bit of the charcoal pencil. And of course, this is compressed charcoal, so the charcoal is darker, but it's also less forgiving. So we have to keep that in mind as well. It's not going to erase nearly as easily as the vine charcoal, but of course, we don't really want it to erase. We want this to sit right where we put it.
Priya mentions that it's amazing that we've never messed up live, and it only shows the talent to both of us. But Priya, it feels like we're constantly messing up little bits and making corrections. So I appreciate that. Thank you for that. We haven't bought up our paper and thrown it away live, but there are, sometimes there's we make little mistakes, but we try to correct them as we go, as we notice them as best we can. So, but thank you so much for that comment. That's wonderful.
Things don't always turn out the way that we think they're going to turn out in our mind. We'll put it that way.
It doesn't always mean it's bad, It's just maybe a deviation from our original intent.
Right. And I've been doing live lessons since 2002 when I first started doing them for the membership program. And
2002?
2012. I'm sorry.
Holy moly.
2012.
You're aging us.
But still, that's a long time.
That is. That's almost 10 years now.
And all of those lessons are available to you, if you're a member.
You should go back and watch the early ones.
Yeah, you should go back and watch them because it is hilarious.
We watched a little bit of one, I think a week or two ago.
That was back when live streaming was brand new. And the video quality had to be really low to make up for people's bandwidth.
Right.
And it was a completely different world. And because of that, the quality of the videos had to be lower. And of course, I didn't have all the equipment that I have now. It was a much different environment. And I was also trying to do complete drawings within an hour at the very beginning when I started. And that eventually morphed into series, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, things sometimes don't work out the way you intend them to.
Chris has a comment. Any suggestions for erasing colored pencil brushed with terpenoid? Just one mark ruined my drawing.
What I would try to do, actually, this is not going to tell you how to erase it, but I would try to figure out a way to make it work with your drawing. See if you can apply maybe a darker color over the top. See if you can make that little area work with your drawing in some way. We all encountered.
I've had to try that before.
Yeah.
Where there was a blob of ink or something like that. And I thought, well, maybe if I make more blobs of ink, it sounds crazy. It will sort of kind of impart a purposeness and style, maybe. So that's a good, think of it as a creativity exercise. How can you make that spot incorporate or work?
That's happened to all of us before, where you've had a mistake that just cannot be fixed. Then you need to figure out how to incorporate it. Or at least that's what I suggest doing.
Well, Blue Jean 55 says it looks great, Matt.
Thank you there, Blue Jean.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's continue to work our way over here now that we've got our building in place. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and... I don't want this drawing to be too clean and too controlled. So you can see some of these areas up here in the sky where charcoal is flying and it's kind of making little spots. I'm okay with that, actually.
Yeah.
That kind of makes the drawing feel a little bit more moody.
And that sense of sort of unexpectedness or randomness to some of those marks just further communicates nature. Nature's so complex.
Yeah, absolutely. But I will kind of carve out a few little shapes that might be interpreted as trees back here. Just like you might do in a painting.
Carve it out. I like the way that sounds. It's like almost like sculpting in charcoal. Looks good.
Yeah.
So I always like to, when myself or anybody's working with charcoal, I always like to mention that it's sort of the original drawing medium. The oldest drawings that we have on the planet are in caves, and they're made of charcoal. So you can really connect yourself to the very first artists, the nomads, and when you use charcoal.
Okay. As I was getting ready to do, I'm going to go ahead and pull up some of these distant trees here with a charcoal pencil.
If you wouldn't have erased out those trees on the right side along the horizon back there, they just wouldn't look that way. You know, if you drew them with the tip of the charcoal very carefully, they just wouldn't have that an odd shape to them. You know, that unusual shape that sometimes you get from the kneaded eraser, the way it kind of mashes down, or you can pinch it into a little point. I love that look.
Yeah, it definitely makes it more organic. Yeah, you couldn't get that by, just like you can't get some of the looks that you get when you are not negative painting, you know?
Yeah. Sky holes. I used to, when I was in college, I worked for a landscape painter, and he liked to paint trees pretty solid and then put the open spaces through them on top. So his sky color was actually, those were some of the last marks that went in on top of the trees. So from a distance, it looked like you were looking through the trees, but he painted that negative space purposefully last. And then when you got close, you could see these kind of heavy, thick brushstrokes on top of the trees that, you know, created the illusion of an empty space once you step back. And it was so tricky and so cool.
Okay, some of those distant trees are added now. Let's add the little branches that are coming up here. Let's put a few of these little, it's kind of got a little wobbly edge here.
You guys can tell how Matt's really started to slow down a little bit. That sort of fervor he was drawing with earlier. I think that's the way to start a drawing. Even if there's no timer, you know, try to get try to get that paper covered somehow, almost as fast as you can. And then you've got something to work with, you know, and you can go back to each part and manipulate it like we've seen him do and is doing.
And that's if you're using a medium like this. There are some mediums you can't start like that. I mean, if you start with colored pencils like that.
No, maybe not colored pencils. They're their own unique, they present their own unique challenges.
Like, I started this with such fervor. I don't know what happened.
And now I can't erase anything.
I have a solid field of red.
Well, now that would have worked about 60 or 70 years ago. You could hang that in the gallery. Yeah.
Did you see that documentary? There's a documentary out now.
I know the documentary you're talking about before you even say it, and I haven't seen it. And people were talking to me about it.
I was watching it last night.
I am so excited to see it, and I can't wait.
I fell asleep.
You're talking about the math teacher? Is this the one with the math teacher that copied the
Chinese artist? Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then fled back to China after it was uncovered that he was creating knockoffs. That's what I haven't seen it, so I may get this wrong, but it sounds exciting.
It is very, very interesting. All right, now I'm going to start working on some of these bits of open tree here.
I understand that there was, you know, a lot of money involved in that sort of that con
millions and millions.
Yeah.
Okay, so as Ashley was referring to earlier, I'm going to start sculpting this tree. That's this is not the tall tree here. Okay, we're going to draw that with the compressed charcoal pencil. And I need to, I just looked at the clock and I'm in trouble. 10 minutes.
Priya says that timer needs a snooze option.
Jeez, I thought I was just cruising along here. So I'm going to quickly erase out some of these negative spaces in between this.
Melody asks, do you guys finish the drawing off camera or just leave it like that? We leave it like that. I mean, sometimes I might touch it for 20 or 30 seconds because I have a really hard time stopping. but we have to stop because we have got another show to do over at thevirtualinstructor.com. So we don't really keep working on them. We present them the way they finished out at 45 minutes.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this tree up here because I have to. I don't have time to go work on the tree behind it.
Nope. Now it's time to...
And this tree is actually made up of light and dark areas, but for the most part, I'm going to be just filling it in mostly with darker areas, and then we're going to put a little puff of charcoal around the edges.
All right.
Like that.
That looks like a Dr. Seuss tree. Just leave it like that.
It does. Did you hear about the Dr. Seuss books?
I've been hearing things. I try to shut myself off from popular culture and news and things like that.
idea.
I've kind of created a world for myself.
And I try to do that too.
But occasionally the outside world creeps in. The most contact I have with humans is you guys in the chat once a week. No, I'm just kidding. I see humans in my real everyday life, but I have heard some rumblings about Dr. Seuss, and I don't know exactly what's being said.
I don't know all the details either, but
I've got my own opinions about Dr. Seuss, and I'm nervous to share them.
yeah. All right. So I'm going to try to put as many of these branches on here as I possibly can in 8 minutes.
But no matter what you believe about Dr. Seuss, and I don't like everything Dr. Seuss did, I still love The Grinch That Stole Christmas. Just the part where his heart grows bigger and bigger and bigger. Just that part. So does it feel like you're just barely touching the paper, kind of skipping over it a little bit?
Yeah, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
When I want a thicker mark, I'm putting more pressure on the pencil, but you can see here, we can put these little poofs here and there. And just pull it downward, and it almost feels like a collection of smaller branches at the end of the tree.
This is nice because you're letting the imagination of your viewer do a little bit of the work. Everybody's creative, and we can tap into our viewers' imagination sometimes too.
And of course, you can go back in and clean that up if you want. Or just leave it that way, but either way, you end up with a pretty good illusion there.
Yeah. Alana asks, are you drawing those leaves with the hard or the soft charcoal? You're doing those little puffs with the soft charcoal. Those little puffs are
with the compressed charcoal. I mean, the vine charcoal,
okay.
Yeah.
The soft stuff. Okay.
The soft stuff, yeah. You're not going to be able to do that with the compressed.
No. You can put a dark mark down with the compressed and smear it out, but where it was dark, it's still dark. It's pretty powerful stuff.
So you can see I'm getting little stray marks here and there. I'm not worried about that too much. I am worrying about the fact that I'm not going to get this tree finished, though.
I can hear the music speeding up.
Yeah, it's definitely speeding up now. I should have kept working with the same fervor. But if I can get the bulk of this tree on here, let's see, it's only 7:18.
Yeah, we could go a little over tonight. So Judith asks, how many more episodes of Gettin Sketchy will there be? I think there's 4 more in this season. Is that right?
I think this is actually 7.
Oh, okay. 3 more. Okay.
So 3 more after tonight.
Okay. So I've got 2 more drawings to make, and Matt has 1.
I think that's right. Yeah.
This is a 10 episode season, I believe.
And the thing about trees is when you're drawing the branches, there's always seems to be more branches. The more branches you add, usually the better. It seems like people add too few branches a lot of times if you're looking for a realistic appearance there. But I'm limited in my time here, so I have to be a little bit choosy. And look, there's another tree behind this one. We'll just kind of insinuate that real quickly here.
So Veek asked, what kind of charcoal is Matt using right now for the tree? He's using a compressed charcoal right now in a pencil form or pencil stick. If you have a piece of compressed charcoal that's a square stick, you can still use it. You'll just want to use the little sharp corners, but it would be the same charcoal.
Yeah, it's still compressed charcoal.
Maybe not in the same brand. What brand is that pencil?
This is a Royal pencil.
I should say charcoal pencil.
So this is a very inexpensive charcoal pencil.
Well, you know, that's another reason charcoal is great. It's an inexpensive medium anyway, and it's a serious art medium, but still inexpensive.
I'm gonna try to get some of these little puffs in here to make the tree feel a little bit more.
Pastor Burns says it feels like a storm is coming. That's true. It is a little stormy out there.
That means I'm capturing a mood.
Yeah,
here.
that's good. That's a good comment.
That's my goal here. So, and you know, these are little tiny branches. It's what they really are, but
they're just they're so tight. They look
so
like
tight,
they
yeah.
almost just look like they're, well, like you said, little poof balls. Real soft looking, even though they're branches.
So you can imagine with more time, if we continue to work on this.
Well, you set your,
tree here.
you know, you've set a goal, you know, and it is to create mood and atmosphere. So not necessarily to draw each branch. If we were going to do that, we'd have to use a bigger piece of paper. You can see how big the paper is compared to Matt's hand. And you know, your level of detail is limited or achievable sometimes based on the scale that you're working compared to the tool or the media that you've chosen to use.
But still, you could definitely get more detail there with a little bit more time.
Oh yeah.
More branches is really would be the the way to go. More branches, more of these guys in here.
Mm-hmm. Kool-Aid says it looks like a willow tree. I don't know exactly what kind of tree that is, but it does have that kind of feeling to it, like those branches do kind of sag or hang down on the edges a little bit.
All right, let's add some compressed charcoal down here real quick and get some of these darker tones in here.
Now, Alana says that the reference she's using has a rundown cottage and a big tree in it also, but it has more prairie grass in the foreground. Advice for tackling the grass. I have some advice, and that would be to pretty much kind of approach that like Matt's approached a lot of the subject matter here, which is go ahead and make that area dark with the, if you're using charcoal, with the vine charcoal that's softer, and then use eraser marks to make a lot of those wispy grasses, and that way those dark spaces, those dark spaces that are left over just look like the shadows between the.
I actually
between
meant
the grass.
to come back to that to the grass up there.
I even do that when I paint. You know, if I have to paint grass that is pretty detailed and clear, like if the composition requires it, you know, if it's a low angle or there's just grass really close, I'll go ahead and paint that area very, very dark, like blackish green, and let it dry, and then make my grass blades on top of that. So in this case, that's how you're thinking like a painter when you're working with charcoal, by using the eraser to make light marks over dark, or actually into the dark. Good question.
So I'm going to leave this other tree out.
Okay.
There's no way I could finish that. So we'll try to bring this to at least a somewhat finished sketch here. Indication of a fence there.
Alana, I see your next comment. Yeah, you can do the same thing with a soft charcoal pencil, pretty much. But an eraser, you have to press down a little bit more with your eraser to dig through the pencil than through charcoal. So you just need to make sure it's pretty sharp, like has a new edge on it, or you kind of clean it off or wear it down into a fine edge. So when you give it a little more pressure to cut through the graphite versus the charcoal, the mark won't get too wide.
All right, time's up. So I'm just going to keep working here.
Let's see. Oh, it's just 7:25.
Yeah, I'm just going to try to work some of this compressed charcoal in.
Well, it's an evenly worked sketch like we talked about before. So in that case, you can quit at any time and it looks like it's complete.
Well,
I love how the sky is just a little bit darker in places in your drawing than the reference. I think that adds something to the picture and helps to keep that sky from feeling too big. You mentioned wanting to move the horizon up, but I don't think you needed to since you did a little bit more modeling in the sky.
Yeah, without that, though, the sky would have been too expansive. I
agree.
Think. But anyway, I'm still able to, since we did put a little bit more effort into the building here, the opening, it's still reading as the focal point.
Oh, yeah.
I do want to just show you how cool this eraser is, even though I didn't get to really use it. Let's say I wanted to pull out some of this. Oh, you see how easy that erases? I can really...
Oh, my. Look at that.
Really sculpt around the edges. It's hard to see there because it's small, but... Oh, it just tears right into it.
It sounds like it's tearing right through the paper. It really does here in the studio.
See how we could get a little bit more refinement there? If we wanted to. Really love this thing. Let's see if we can bring a little bit more light into this field here.
Now, who makes this eraser again?
This is just some kind of generic brand here. It says Artisan on the side. But,
okay.
You can get these at. Ooh, look at that! I like that.
Yeah.
You can get this at. Pretty much any art store.
Okay.
Might be able to get it at an office supply store too. Let's erase out a few highlights here since we got those so dark, or those so light. Just a few of these little grassy areas here. Ooh, look how strong that is. That's too strong. All right. Just a little bit more on there. Anyway. All right, I'm gonna finally stop here.
Well, Mateo from Germany says he loves this. Pastor Burns says he'd love to use this picture in a sermon illustration. And Pat asks, what kind of paper did you use? I missed that.
This is Strathmore 400 series drawing paper. So it's just regular old drawing paper. It's the 400 series, so it's kind of a step up, I think.
Okay.
But just nothing fancy here, just regular drawing paper.
Not special charcoal paper. It didn't have a tooth to it.
No, it's not charcoal paper. In fact, on charcoal paper, this technique that we're using right here might be a little bit more difficult to pull off.
That's a good comment we should mention. Because of the tooth, maybe?
Yeah, because of the texture. The charcoal paper will hold the charcoal in place a little bit easier, and that can make it a little bit more difficult to erase. And charcoal paper is usually off-white. It's not a perfect white. It's kind of a creamy color.
Yeah.
And because it's a little bit creamier, the areas that you erase out, the highlighted areas, are not going to be quite as strong. Let's see if we can pull off a few.
Yeah, that's true. I'd rather my paper, if it's not going to be stark white, I'd rather go all the way to something like gray or blue or black, so that I can purposely use a number of lighter values over it.
I can't help myself here.
Did you say it's 90 pound? Is that what you said?
I don't know what the weight is.
It's probably 80. It might be 80 pounds.
Yeah, it's probably 80 pounds.
Yeah.
That
would be my guess.
Not super heavy.
I Alana says, this was fun. Thanks, guys. You're welcome.
But I'm not finished.
It's especially fun for me. I get to watch tonight.
Yeah, it'll be fun for me next week. It was fun tonight, too. All right. All right, now I'm going to definitely stop.
All right.
All right, let's switch back out over here.
All right, very nice.
All right, well, thank you guys for sticking around for the last 45 minutes, hour or so. If you did, I hope you enjoyed this. It's maybe a different way of drawing that many of you are accustomed to. A lot of times, especially if you're a beginner or an intermediate artist, you might just start off by drawing those contour lines. You don't really think about the masses of forms that are found within, in this case, a landscape, and how you can create the illusion just by creating shapes of different values. And that's kind of the approach that we took tonight. Of course, you can push the values back and forth, making values darker by adding more material and more of the compressed charcoal, making areas lighter by erasing and then using the blending stump to work it around. So next week, Ashley's going to be doing the drawing. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready. I know what I'm drawing, but I'm going to keep it a secret because I'm not sure what I'm going to draw with. So you may have to wait. Matt, will you? Do you publish our medium and subject matter prior to the show?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe next Wednesday, tune in sometime during the day or check the newsletter.
Yeah, I will send out an email next Wednesday,
Okay.
usually about 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And if you want to get that email, you need to be on our newsletter list. So that means you need to click on the link below this video where it says, check out 3 free course videos. So there's a link for 3 free course videos and ebooks. Clicking on that will take you to a page where you can put in your email address. Now that will automatically put you on our newsletter list. You'll also get those 3 course videos and ebooks, of course, which are pretty cool. But you'll be notified when we do Getting Sketchy here, and you'll also be notified when we post new lessons, and you'll also get emails about some of the free lessons that are already on the site that will help you out in your drawing or painting.
That way you won't miss
journey.
a thing. That's great. That's great. Thank you, Matt. And I guess we'll see you guys next week.
Yes, we will see you right here next week. And Ashley will be doing the drawing. But for those of you who are members, I will see you, and Ashley will see you.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
In just a few minutes, just 28 minutes from now, we're going to be live over on the virtualinstructor.com. And if you're not a member, you can try out our program for free for a week, and you can join us tonight for tonight's live lesson.
See what it's like. It's very different over there.
Yeah, it's just a little bit slower, and we create finished pieces over there instead of this the sketchier stuff. But the sketchier stuff is a lot of fun. So I hope you had a lot of fun. I definitely had a lot of fun. Thanks to everybody in the chat box. With that, I'm going to go ahead and sign out here. Good night, guys.